big background in this preservation area, working for the public sector, both as a city engineer and county engineer, with the consultant end of things with this preservation project, and also with the LRB. She's been involved with the studies that have, a lot of it has been the background to most of these modules. So we do appreciate Sue taking making the effort and doing all the work behind the scenes and getting this and presenting this information to you, the local agencies. So anyway, Sue, again, welcome, and you can take it over.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Thank you all for attending today. This is module number 4 out of the 5 module series that we have slated for you on the system preservation topic. And what that is meant to be is this series of modules starts off with that introduction to system preservation, and then in module 2 we talked about funding gaps and transportation planning as ways to look at your systems, and module 3 was capital improvement planning strategies. Today is on operations, or levels of service, if you will, and maintenance strategies. And then our final module is October 31st on modifying your network, so right sizing your system. Just a reminder, the entire webinar series is hosted on the State Aid, the SALT website. So all of the previous webinars are available and have been recorded. We're recording today, and they are uploaded, as well as any of the documentation, the PowerPoints and resources are also uploaded onto that website for you to take a look at as well. So just to recap, why are we even talking about things like system preservation? What does that really mean? And when this started, more than 10 years ago now, there were several county engineers, city engineers that were talking about, just not enough resources to maintain your system to the same level of service that we had been maintaining our systems. And every city, every county is different. So not necessarily that there's one solution that works, but something that is happening in one part of the state might work in another part of the state. And it was a way to bring people together and to talk about ways that we can do more with less, ways that we can kind of hold our systems together with gorilla glue and duct tape, if you will. City and county engineers have been absolutely masters of creation and doing more with less, and that art. But we're really getting to that point with your system aging and resources not necessarily keeping pace, where it was getting harder and harder to maintain that level of service in the system. So collectively, a number of counties got together and as a pilot and looked at a process for really looking at your system and trying to figure out what are the strategies we can lean on to make our systems work better and maintain that level of service. So the first and foremost step of the process was to identify those needs. We talked in a previous module about a gap analysis. So if your paved system, or if you're a city and you've got a water main system or a sanitary sewer system, it can work for any one of your systems. Is if you really identify that need and you look at the expected service life of that asset that you're talking about, and you cost out what it's going to cost you to either maintain, repair, or replace, then looking at it from that perspective to say, annually I'm going to need X number of dollars compared to how many dollars you're getting, and then you can define what the gap is. The strategies are intended to be ways that we can address the gap, not necessarily close the gap, but address the gap. And how do we engage and educate across all of these different stage points of walking through your system maintenance and preservation before we get into implementation. So you're bringing along your elected officials, you're bringing along the public, and understanding the challenges that you all have working in your cities and your counties on trying to hold your systems together. Finally, once you've developed some strategies and you looked at opportunities of ways that you can address the gap, what do you want to implement? What's going to work best in your specific city or county, as far as how do you want to try to get that system to last longer, to be able to mitigate some of the challenges that you're having in the system as it ages? Are there other techniques and strategies? So as I mentioned, we talked about that gap analysis, and really is different for every agency. It's a relative measurement. It's a point of view for your agency at that point in time of how much is it costing you to maintain your system. You can project out different ways of doing this. In 5 years, what do we think it's going to cost us to maintain our system versus what do we expect for our forecasted revenue coming in? Funding has become very fluid over the last, say, 10 to 15 years. We have a lot of opportunity out there to apply for grants. And that's great to be able to get those kinds of resources into your system, but that nice consistent revenue stream, either through the gas tax and your state aid dollars or through the federal formulas, we just aren't seeing those resources keep up with the needs on your system. So being able to use a method of measurement, educating your elected officials on how you're measuring that, and then being able to tell them that story of here's what the gap is now. You know, if we were to build out our systems and maintain it using things like industry standards or past practices, here's how much money we're going to need in the future, and being able to continuously update them on where's the gap at now. It's just really a good way to have that conversation with your elected officials. Now I should go back to in my days of being the Freeborn County engineer when this all started. We were having challenges on being able to share this gap and get the county board to understand closing this gap is really a shared responsibility. It's not just going to fall on the backs of the city engineer or the county engineer to try to do this. You really need the help and the support of your elected officials. And so creating nice little graphics like this to be able to educate your elected boards on what is that gap and why do we need your help, and is there opportunity when you're addressing your systems when you're doing, you know, this time of the year. You know, levies have been set now, all they can do is lower the levy, and you guys are all out there in the next couple of months trying to protect the amount that they have allocated for your entity, because they can only lower between now and December, and you want to be able to protect the house, so to speak, on educating your elected officials on why you need every penny of those dollars to be able to maintain your system and the level of service you have. So some of the strategies that we've previously talked about as far as how do we go about trying to address that gap. And again, not necessarily closing it, but maybe educating and creating understanding of why we even have the gap. So we talked about, in a previous module, we talked about the transportation planning exercise. And if you're in the Twin City metro area, you have a requirement to go through a transportation planning or a comprehensive planning update on a regular cycle. But not everybody in Minnesota has that requirement. And it is still a very good tool for you to be able to go through a process of setting your goals and objectives, and to be able to understand what the needs of the system are holistically, and to work with an engagement or a stakeholder involvement opportunities along the way as you develop that long-range transportation plan. So that's really a good tool. It is very time-consuming to generate and create a long-range transportation plan. It can be a little bit expensive depending on your agency size and your revenue streams, but it really is a great tool to get everybody on the same page as to how we're going to manage and maintain the system going forward. We also talked about two kind of really kind of connected strategies: performance measures and project prioritization. So performance measures is establishing a set of guidelines for your system on here's what we really want to strive for. Pavements being one of your biggest assets that most of you manage, it might be something like, what pavement quality index do you want your overall system to be? And if we're striving to keep our system at a 72 pavement quality index or a PQI, what level of investment do we need to meet that performance measure? And then tied to that, in your performance measures, you might want to fall into your project prioritization. And what's that criteria of how you're going to rank and schedule certain projects ahead of other projects when funding is limited, your resources are being stretched? It falls on you as the city or county engineer and your teams to prioritize the projects you're going to do. Inevitably, you're going to get the question, how come we didn't do this project instead of that project? And you can lean back on those performance measures or the goals and objectives established in your transportation plan as the criteria or the foundational points of why those certain projects are elevated and made it into the 5-year plan, and other ones are in your unfunded category. So some of the strategies that have been used in the past for project prioritization is really to look at your traffic count, your functional class, that pavement quality index, looking at opportunities to improve safety. Sometimes, like I mentioned, the opportunity to get outside federal funds might make that an ideal opportunity for you to advance a project over another project. So, quick poll for today. When we talk about level of service that we're going to talk about today and looking at your maintenance and operations, we're going to pop up a poll here for you to understand how many of you are tailoring your investment by either roadway type, functional class, traffic count, connectivity. Are you making adjustments where you're prioritizing investments on one system or another part of your system based on any of these criteria or condition? So take just a few seconds here to give you all a chance to respond to that. I think at this point we have about 27 attendees on the call, so. And please don't worry, we're not tracking who's answering what. We just want to get a feel for how many folks are out there making adjustments on your investments. Just a few more seconds and we'll end the poll. So overall, that condition data that you're getting either through the MnDOT van driving your system, or if you have another way that you're measuring your pavement condition or your bridge condition through your bridge inspection systems, that condition rating that you're getting is a big driver of how we choose what we're going to invest in and how we choose that level of service that we want to make sure we're maintaining a certain condition. Certainly our state aid system versus our non-state aid system, sometimes obviously, we have state aid standards that we maintain that state aid system to that might require a higher level of investment, higher level of service than the non-state aid system. Maintenance strategies, we're going to talk a lot more about that later in this module. I'm a little surprised to see connectivity to those economic drivers as kind of a lesser used criteria. And the surprise to me is that, and especially in a rural area, but I've even talked to a lot of our folks in the urban area, that when you have an economic driver come in, they're really driving investments on those areas that are trying to connect to, industries or businesses or, the big freight mobility type connectivity issues. So thank you all for responding to that poll and giving us a flavor of where everybody's at before we get started here. So one of the ways we talked about really addressing the gap, and this one is one that starts to close the gap, is to look at your system as a tiered system approach. And what does that mean for a tiered system approach? It really means that you're looking at shifting the allocation of your dollars in a way that prioritizes an area of your system that might be what you consider to be a higher risk category of your system or a higher traffic count category of your system, where you want to invest and meet a higher standard or a more frequent schedule versus other parts of your system that might be on the lower volume end of your system, lower use, lower risk, and you're willing to let those maintenance needs stretch out a little bit longer so you can stretch those dollars out a little bit longer. Some of this happens naturally without us really being too intentional about it. It's just part of, this is all we can invest in, and the lower parts of our systems, the maybe lesser utilized pieces of our systems get that money last. So when we looked at this with the, and I apologize, the slide got a little blurry, I don't know why. But when we looked at this from a systems approach, we really talked about looking at the hierarchy of a roadway system. And again, the same strategies can work for you folks that are on with the cities, can work for maintaining your sanitary sewer system, your water main system, is developing how you want to establish what your standards are, what's your guidelines for how often you want to make those investments in certain types of roads. And then you can look at developing a maintenance program that addresses that, implementing that, looking back and auditing that and saying, did that work? Was there public outcry based on our changed levels of service and our changed investment strategies? Do we have to tweak and retool and maybe go back to the beginning and adjust our standards a little bit and then follow it all the way through again and see how the public is reacting, the elected officials are reacting. So in Otter Tail County, 2 counties in the pilot counties really spent a lot of time looking at level of service and adjusting their investment strategies based on tiers of their system. And for Otter Tail County, their biggest driving factor was the fact that almost 60% of their paved system, and in Otter Tail County, they have the great blessing, or maybe you might consider it now in this day and age, the great challenge of having the entire over 1,000 miles of their system paved. They don't have any gravel on their system. So when they have a huge paved system, they started looking at the data and almost 60% of their system was over 20 years old. Meaning that in the next 5 to 10 to 20 years for sure, they were going to have to be making huge investments on more than half their system. And as they looked at that and understood that the financial tails to that and the implications to their budgets going forward was going to be very challenging, they wanted to get ahead of that curve a little bit and work with their county board to say, what can we do? How do we address this? So they went through their system and they looked at creating a tiered system and addressing different levels of service, different standards, different frequencies based on a platinum, gold, silver, and bronze, a 4-level system. So just looking at their county road system, not looking at any of the state or the township or the city streets, just their county system, both their state aid and non-state aid system was categorized into these 4 classifications, if you will. And those classifications were based on specific goals and objectives and criteria. And Otter Tail County developed those goals and objectives and criteria through a transportation plan with their county board, with listening sessions across, Otter Tail County being a large county, they went out to the 5 commissioner districts and hosted a variety of listening sessions in each of those 5 commissioner districts. They did 3 or 4 rounds in each district where they went out to where the people were and very well attended and got very good education and very good buy-in and understanding that if my road in front of my house is on the platinum level, it's going to see a higher level of service than if the roadway in front of my house is on the bronze level, it's going to see a lesser level of service, so to speak, or a lesser investment. So the things that Otter Tail County used to decide what goes on what classification, those platinum routes were really those highly utilized, highest ADT, highest functional class roadways in the county. Their next tier down was looking at, making sure things are connected, but maybe a mid-level volume, maybe a little less freight movement. Connectors, yes, but not the main thoroughfare, like east to west connectors, but definitely still have a lot of connectivity to them as their second tier. And their third tier down, the silver, was the lower tiers of, doesn't make that gold route ADT level or functionality. Little bit stretched out system maintenance approach. And then the bronze level really is the lowest of the lowest. So those roadways that are paved but are carrying maybe less than 100, less than 150 cars a day on them fell into that lowest. In their case, it was less than 200 cars a day. fell into that bronze category. And with each one of those categories, they established different standards. Just as a point of reference, they use seal coating as how often a seal coat was going to be applied on different classifications of their roadways. But the same thing can happen with your construction standards and saying, you know, on our bronze level system, we are not going to do full-blown reconstructs on anything on our bronze system. Those are huge investments to do full reconstructions. And we're going to reserve that strategy strictly for a platinum and gold level. And we will do other things on our silver and bronze to maintain those systems. Maybe it's mills and overlays, maybe it's cold in place recycling or other methodologies. So there's a lot of different tiers that you can do either from a construction design strategy or from a maintenance strategy. So in Otter Tail County, when they did this, they took a really good look at what's the age of those pavements in each of those tiers. And if your platinum road system is your highest traffic count system, and it's carrying the majority of your traffic, it's implied that that's where your biggest risk is for how you want to maintain your system. So you probably want to make a bigger investment and make sure that if 24.1% of your system is in your platinum category, you probably want to make some investments in that platinum category and get that percentage down. So your highest risk, heaviest used part of your system is getting a larger investment. And through their engagement and stakeholder involvement process, they really developed a great public understanding of this and a great understanding with their elected officials. They also looked at it from a pavement quality and pavement condition standpoint. And if their overall goal from a system perspective was meeting their target, but they weren't meeting it on their platinum system, then they were going to reallocate resources to make sure that they got those platinum roads at their highest goal. And so they set that goal at an 80. They wanted everything on their system to meet that 80 pavement quality index. So to go from a 66 to an 80 is going to take a couple of years of investment to be able to see that dial move. And obviously that's going to affect something. And so for their system, they looked at the bronze system, a goal of 60. And again, this is where you can set goals and objectives. You can make investments like this. And if you get a lot of public discussion on the bronze system as it's falling to a 60 as a goal, and you're going to see a reduced level of service, so to speak, or reduced pavement quality of that bronze system, you may get a lot of public outcry about that. You might have a lot of folks that don't want to see that level of investment change. And there's your opportunity to go back to your elected officials, to go back to the public and say, okay, something's got to give somewhere. This is our goal. Then what do we want to shift and change? Freeborn County did a very similar system. However, we ended up with a 3-tiered system just to keep it a little simpler. Went with the gold, silver, bronze methodology. And I used to be the Freeborn County engineer, so apologies for saying we still, but in Freeborn County, they don't have as many miles of road as Otter Tail County. Otter Tail County had 1,041 miles of road. Freeborn County had 634 miles of road. So across their system, both with county roads and county state aid highways, Freeborn County already has a lot of gravel in their system, over 200 miles of gravel in that network. So all the gravel roads obviously fell down to that bronze level. And then the silver level was, your lower volumed paved system, and the gold tier was the highest functional class and your highest ADT, most connectivity routes on that paved county state aid system. So some of the things that we did, or Freeborn County did back then, was they looked at, again, similar to Otter Tail County, when was that first seal coat going to happen? When were we going to make investments at certain key milestones on the life cycle of a roadway? Also looked at pavement condition index that would trigger that maintenance overlay, and at what point would we make sure that we're investing in the pavement at the right time. The gold level in Freeborn County wanted an overall average pavement condition index of 80, and it was currently sitting at an 82. The silver system, they wanted to be over 75. It was currently sitting at an 80. And the bronze system, which there were some paved roads, but only a few, they wanted to be over 70, and it was currently at a 77. So you would look at that and say, wow, okay, based on those numbers, they're already meeting or exceeding those numbers. But what we looked at for Freeborn County was, what does that look like as you project out your deterioration curves on your pavement? And can you meet that with the current revenue source coming in? And it was very clear in Freeborn County, looking at our performance curves in our pavement management system, we were going to fall woefully below 80 and more than likely fall below 75 in that silver category if we didn't change the way we were investing in those systems. So just kind of to wrap up the concept behind the tiered system, it's really looking at your assets, your asset classes, having some stakeholder input, using your GIS tools as mapping tools to be able to show things, taking the data that you have. If you have the last couple of years of MnDOT's van data, you don't necessarily have to have performance curves on all your pavement systems. You can map out and see what's been happening to certain roadways just using the last couple of years of your MnDOT pavement van data. And it might be something you want to really take some time to engage in your operations and your maintenance folks. They're an absolute huge resource in helping you make these decisions on what level of service you should be looking at for certain roads. They're the ones that are out there every day. And I would strongly encourage you, if you're not already, most of you I'm sure are, get them in a room and ask them. Put these maps on the board, on the whiteboards, hang them up, get their buy-in, get their interest, let them poke holes at it and help you decide what roads should be on what system and what makes sense. And then finally, that critical piece of engaging with your stakeholders. Your key stakeholders are the users of our road systems who are out there every day. And when I work with elected officials, I'm always reminding them that there is one aspect of their investment responsibility that touches every single person in every single system every day, and that is your road system. And they want to make sure they're making good investments in that road system. So, couple checklists is to take a look at what kind of criteria you want, what's that data available that you want to use to make those decisions, how many tiers do you want, how do you want to define those tiers working within your teams, how do you want to change what either your maintenance strategies are or what your overall toolbox looks like for each category as far as what you would do for a construction technique. Now in Freeborn County, the other thing that they did is they also took that data and they applied it to their snowplow maintenance approach and their winter operations approach on things like anti-icing and getting certain units, doubling up units even on that gold tier system to make sure that they went with the flow of traffic to get rid of that compaction that you would just be fighting to get that snow and ice off those roads. So front loading those resources, those maintenance resources on those higher tiered roadways up front to make sure that compaction didn't happen on those high ADT roads, improving the safety of those roads, lowering that risk on those roads. But that meant that motor graders that might be out on a gravel road are now scraping the snowpack off on a paved road. And that gravel road system is going to wait 4 or 5 hours before we put a unit out there. What Freeborn County learned in that process was it didn't make a lot of difference. We tracked every single phone call that came into Freeborn County during that period, and every compliment as well as every complaint that came in for the system. And by changing the way we invested those resources in our winter maintenance operation, we actually saw more compliments come into the system about how good our system looked compared to driving into a neighboring system or onto the state DOT system. And we saw no comments on anybody saying, how come somebody hasn't been past my house and taken care of this road yet? So making very minor adjustments across your system and level of service can really yield a big bang for your buck, so to speak. So with all that being said, just Dan's got open the Q&A portion. We can all see what your thoughts are here. So in the Q&A, if you hit your Q&A button down there, you can type in what is the one area where you feel like you could reduce the level of service to free up some resources. And then the second part of that is if you're freeing up a few resources or you work with your county board or your elected official for a huge levy increase this cycle, where is the one area you would like to improve your level of service? I'll take just a minute to see if you guys can answer that one. Jono, I'm not sure our Q&A is open right now.
People not seeing it. I have it here. Let's see here. It says that attendees are allowed to submit questions.
There we go.
We'll get a couple, but I'm not seeing.
I will give it just another second. I guess I'm not seeing the results. Maybe Jono, are you?
I am not seeing. I see people are writing them in, but why is this?
Tell you what, folks, this is the teaser. We're gonna get these results captured and we will present them when we do the office hour, and certainly we will populate them into PowerPoint that gets uploaded into the state aid website. So we can go ahead and leave it open for another few seconds here, and then we can close this one out.
Sounds good.
So shifting gears away from level of service and jumping into new maintenance techniques. And there is an ever-changing approach to how we maintain our systems. Things like seal coating, for example. I think for the 4th time, the Local Road Research Board and the Research Implementation Committee just went through updating seal coat strategies, for example. When to seal coat, how many agencies are still seal coating. And back in the day, the Ojai County engineer at the time was one of the biggest champions of seal coating strategies when I first became a county engineer. Over time, as PG graded asphalts came into play, we saw more and more people making investments in better oils in our asphalts. And we saw people like the Ojai County engineer, who was the biggest champion for seal coating, saying, I only seal coat in very rare instances now, only on my highest ADT, highest functionality roads. His understanding and his feeling was he was making that investment in those oils up front, and the seal coat wasn't going to give him as much extended life, service life. In other places, like in Freeborn County where I was, our system was not failing, or our pavements weren't failing because they were oxidizing and aging out. They were failing because we had very poor subgrades underneath them. Great soils for farming, but terrible soils for building roads, a lot of frost boil problems. And the lack of enforcement on the system was causing challenges for our heavy commercial traffic, which was putting excessive weight on our roads when they were at the most vulnerable. and we were seeing our pavements fail from that perspective. And not because we weren't getting the fully utilized life out of that pavement. So looking at maintenance techniques is very personal to your city or your county system. It's the right maintenance toolbox that you want to have that addresses the issues that you have in your system. And every single one of you are going to look at this in a little bit different way and form. What we wanted to do with the system preservation aspect of this is just to make sure everybody was sharing what they were doing on their systems, because it may be something I want to try on in my city or county, and it's working really well somewhere else. So I'm going to try it and see if I can either reduce my costs or extend that service life of my asset through making a smaller investment. So, like we talked about, seal coating is one of those things that's been heavily studied by the local road research board. Really, it is a personal preference based on which resource, which study do you want to believe? There are a lot of Tom Woods fans out there. For those folks that are as old as me and have been around a while, you might be a disciple of Tom Woods and you're going to seal coat forever because you've worked with him. He comes and looks at your system and he helps you identify what's the best way to seal coat. And you're designing those seal coats that's really giving you an effective use out of your roadway. So seal coating is not necessarily a new maintenance technique, but there are changes in how we do those seal coats. There's changes in the aggregate classes. The specs have changed over the years. So understanding what's in the Minnesota Seal Coat Handbook, long-term performances gives you an idea of if this is a strategy. If you're not doing it, maybe you want to do it. Now, I will note, I don't think Phil Wackles is on the call today. But in Freeborn County, they now seal coat everything. Phil had read the research reports and decided he wanted to seal coat everything, and they're back to seal coating. And that's great. Everybody's going to look at their system and have different perspectives and points of view on whether or not they want to invest in seal coating as one of their maintenance strategies. So recently, in this last upgrade to the seal coating LRB RAC project, there were 60 people that responded saying, yes, we still seal coat. 36 counties, 24 cities, and only 27 that said, no, we are not seal coating, and a number of reasons why. Now, cities, if you look at the city numbers, you'll say, counties, it's a pretty clear definition that most of them are seal coating, but in the cities, it's about a 50-50. And part of that reason is there have been some issues on why some seal coats were failing in the urban environment, and there's a lot of theories out there as to why you were seeing deterioration or stripping or some other problems with your seal coats. So I would recommend these resources that are linked, and they'll be linked in the PowerPoint that is uploaded on the state aid website. If you're interested in seal coating, to take a look at those resources. Scrub seals and slurry seals, similar to seal coating a roadway, but with really specific intentionality of what you're hoping to gain by doing it. A scrub seal is really good on those bituminous roads that you're seeing a lot of cracking, and you want to seal that up. It's just really not going to be feasible for you to have either your crews out there or contract to come out and crack fill all the cracks that you're seeing. And a scrub seal can go through a system and cover miles a lot more cost effectively than trying to seal up all those cracks. And as we all know, if we can keep that moisture from permeating through our paved layer and getting into that subgrade layer, we can extend the life of our pavements. So a scrub seal has a very specific use where it can work really well in that kind of situation. A slurry seal is a little bit different. Maybe you have some minor surface distresses you want to improve. Maybe there's some surface resistant friction issues you want to improve. And so scrub seals or slurry seals are being used to create a little more skid resistant. Both these two techniques are covered by MnDOT specifications that are shown on the slide. And both of them are also covered in detail in the Minnesota Seal Coat Handbook that you can go out and take a look at as far as, you know, what are your best practices on how you would apply either a scrub seal or a slurry seal. Cost wise, you know, there's a lot of ways that we can look at costs on systems like this. We can look at what is our cost per square yard, but what does it really effectively mean when you look at it over the life cycle of your pavement? And an annualized cost per lane mile is something that many agencies will use. And so a scrub seal becomes a pretty good bang for your buck at $2,000 per lane mile when you annualize it over the life expectancy of 7 years of getting a nice sealed up pavement. Again, these costs are based on 2023 costs. Microsurfacing, again, this one is not as new either, but not a lot of us are out there doing this. Microsurfacing is really a nice strategy because it cures very quickly. It's a durable surface, it fills in irregularities, gives you a little bit more functionality, if you will, to be able to level up a little bit of rutting, make your pavement almost look like it's back to being brand new again. So it's really an amped up seal coat or maybe a stripped down overlay. You can look at it both ways, but it works really, really well because you're not required to cover the aggregate, and it doesn't have any loose chips that sometimes you get windshield complaints about it because it's all mixed in right away when you're laying it down with the microsurfacing process. Some folks who microsurface also will do a micro mill with that to true up areas that are a little out of compliance, if you will, and then they will fill back in with their microsurface. The new hot topic, the one that's getting a lot of attention right now, is rejuvenators. And again, if you have been in the industry for the last, 30 plus years like I have, and you're old and you've been around a long time, you've had a lot of folks walking in and out of your doors that maybe we gave them the nickname of the snake oil salesman. They had the latest and greatest thing in a jar that was going to make your system just be perfect. That is really not what's happening with rejuvenators now. What you're seeing out there, as the oil industry has had to really dial down on being really effective with the cost of crude oils, you're really seeing the chemistry of what is in our applications be researched and studied to see what it is that we need to add back into our pavements. What is it we're losing out of our pavements, and what do we have to add back in? So asphaltenes and maltenes are the key components that we're looking at balancing out and to so-called reverse the aging process. And for all of you that watch Monday Night Football and you see all these women oil of Olay products where they're trying to reverse the aging products, it's the same concept that's going on in our cosmetic industry where we're using chemistry to try to turn back time. This is chemistry on our asphalts and our oils to try to turn back time and to take a look at what are the ways that we can make low cost investments, but really stretch that life cycle of that pavement out. So right now there's a big LRB study underway based on a NRA report, and they're testing 12 specific products out on Min-Road's test strips. They've been testing them over a couple of years. They've got great documentation, great pictures of these products and how they're shaping up. And then they've also taken a few of those products and they are testing them in a real world environment in the city of St. Michael, partnering with St. Michael on 15th Street and putting them out there in real time to see how do they function in the city of St. Michael and tracking that pavement flexibility to see, are we really seeing what the vendors are telling us that we're seeing. So another product that's out there, I mentioned there's about 12 products. I think the St. Michael one has 9 different products: BioRestor, CRF Restoration Seal, Delta Mist, Gravel Seal, GSB-88, Replay. Many of you have heard of Replay in the past. And this new one is on the scene called Reclamite, where pink is the new black. It kind of has a pink sheen to it when it goes down. And Reclamite has been used in the city of Woodbury, the city of Eden Prairie, and the city of Richfield. And they have been testing this across different parts of their system to see if it is getting them what they're looking for, is that slowing of that oxidation process, that reversing of that aging system, and making sure that they are adding those maltines back onto that pavement surface to keep that flexibility intact. Now, the caution here is when you talk about rejuvenators, there's a lot of study going on about those right now. And there just isn't a lot of overall life cycle analysis to be able to tell you how much of a bang for your buck you're really getting. But there is a lot more to come on that. These studies will be wrapping up here, and I think there'll be a lot better data out there that will be on the LRB website and be a resource for you to be able to say, okay, I'm going to try this. Or you can reach out to those folks, the city of Woodbury, Eden Prairie, or Richfield, and see talk to the point source and see what they're seeing for success. Right now, they feel like it's a very durable product, and they think they are getting improved flexibility. So if you wanted to summarize, an overall look at making different levels of investment, this is something that our folks in our Office of Materials and Research have put together. Joel Allring is a great resource for city and county engineers, and you all as city and county engineers are using some of your gas tax money, your state aid money to help the Office of Materials and Research answer your questions. So please reach out to that MnDOT office if you have questions about any of these and what these life expectancies might be, what kind of average costs you might see, what are the pros and cons of doing those strategies, what are the application methods that you want, how much training do you need for your staff if you're going to be applying these or putting these out on contract. So really, I can't say enough how fortunate we are in Minnesota to have our Office of State Aid. And by extension, our Office of State Aid has made investments in our Office of Materials Research and a couple other offices across MnDOT, where they are a huge resource for you as city and county engineers. And this is just my public service announcement of the day to remind you that they are there to help you as well as to help keep MnDOT system working well. So please reach out to your friends at State Aid and they can direct you in the right location. So another quick poll, just to gauge the folks that we've got on the call today. Now we're up to about 31 folks here. Which ones of these things that we talked about are you actively experimenting with or using as maintenance techniques? Let's say in the last 2 years, which ones of these have you used in the last 2 years? Your last call for your answers. That's only 13 of you. Maybe those are the only ones that are trying these. Good to see who's trying the rejuvenators. A couple folks that are on this call, so they probably can give those slides and that presentation way better than me and know way more about that. Those resources that are out there in the Office of Materials and Research that I mentioned, or you can always go to the local road research board, lrrb.org, and put right in that search engine what you're looking for. If you want to look up slurry seals, there might be research and point you right to things on the LRB website. But I'm giving you Joel's direct line, how you can reach out to Joel from a pavement preservation perspective. as well as the bituminous engineering and the pavement preservation websites have a ton of information out there that can help you make these decisions on which entities you want to try. Joel's pretty well in tune to who's trying what out there on the networks and the systems, so he can point you in the right direction to go talk to a city engineer or county engineer who's trying some of these strategies. So just to wrap up, there are a lot of maintenance techniques out there that you can use. There are a lot of different construction techniques out there that you can use. If you don't want to do complete reconstruction, full depth reclamation is out there. There's been hot in place, cold in place recycling as construction / maintenance techniques. And all of those techniques you can find resources in the links that are attached here, either through FHWA or MnDOT, or like I mentioned, the local road research board. So there is no shortage of information out there for you to explore and investigate those items. Next steps. So as I mentioned, we're on module 4, and I alluded to the fact that we have an office hour. And with the way we've done each of these modules is next week on Monday, September 30th from noon to 1, we'll have a Zoom link sent out to all 31 of you who are on the call today, and it'll be an open hour just to share ideas, expertise, things that you've tried in your system, ways that other folks are trying these techniques or changing levels of service, or maybe they tried something and it worked really well. Maybe they tried something and it was a dismal failure. And it's just a way to share experiences, and it's really a dialogue amongst all of us together to talk about what we presented here today, and what are you actually looking at in your systems right now, and what would you like to see in the future. So that invitation will be coming out. I'll send that to you later today or early tomorrow morning, and get that in everybody's inbox for next Monday from noon to 1. Those have been really a great opportunity for people to learn from each other. One more quick poll. If you were going to right size your system, our module 5 that's coming up, what topic interests you the least out of the 3 strategies, so to speak, for right sizing your system? So jurisdictional transfer would be that we're going to shift one road on your system to somebody else, or take a road from somebody else's system and put it on your system. Reverting surfaces is really a friendly way to say unpave. Back in my day as a appointed county engineer, reappointed every 4 years, I had a county commissioner say if I used the term unpave ever again in a public setting, it would not be reappointed. So thus the term reverting surfaces. They either naturally revert or you intentionally unpave them. And then the new revenue streams and opportunities. And maybe you feel like you've already exercised all of those, and so of little interest. But those 3 topics is what we'll talk about in module 5. And with that, module 5 is to be hosted on Halloween Day. Nobody has to wear a costume to come to the webinar that day unless you really want to. But on Halloween from noon to 1, we'll host module 5, modifying the network and right sizing the system. So with that, I really want to say thank you to all of you for attending today. Just a quick reminder, all the previous webinars are out there on the MnDOT website, and you can always also go to the local road research board, lrrb.org, and find the original system preservation guide and some of the other tools and the in-depth research of how agencies got to the tiered systems that they did, or chose the maintenance strategies that they did on their system. So very appreciative of the great attendance today, and look forward to seeing you all in module 5, if not before in the office hour next Monday. So thanks to you all.